Tonight. The air feels held back, like someone already knows what the next sentence will be and is waiting anyway. Welcome back to Revenge Sins. We're here, quietly, because some family stories don't start with shouting. They start with a notification that lands like a weight. Her name is Marianne Holt. She serves in the Navy, and she learned early that the people who hurt you the most are often the ones who smile the longest before they reach for what isn't theirs. What happened to her matters because it wasn't loud. It was lonely. It was the kind of betrayal that shows up wearing permission. Here's where she begins. The screen on my desk flashed without sound. Just a single line from the estate security portal my father's attorney insisted I keep active. Unauthorized thermal activity detected. Port of Charleston, Pier 14. I stared at it long enough for the letters to stop looking like words and start looking like a decision. Around me, the office hummed the way it always did on base. Fluorescent lights. A printer someone forgot to turn off. A coffee that had gone cold without me noticing. My phone rang right after, not my personal line. The one routed through the family number. A man kept his voice tight, like he'd already been told to keep this clean. "Ma'am, this is port security at the Port of Charleston. We've got a person attempting access to a private container. The name on our paperwork is Victor Lang. He's listed as related to the estate." He paused, as if waiting for me to correct him. "Victor Lang is my stepfather." "Yes, ma'am. He has industrial equipment, a grinder. He's creating heat on the exterior surface." My throat went dry. Not fear. Something colder. Recognition. Is he alone? He's got one contracted operations worker with him. That worker says this is an emergency estate inventory. We have a consent affidavit on file, signed by Claire Holt, my mother. My hands stayed flat on the desk. I kept my voice even. Do not escalate with him. Keep distance. Maintain observation. Preserve your access logs and footage. We're already recording. Our gate logs show his entry time. We can hold the area, but if the paperwork checks out, we can't physically remove him without a warrant. I understand. When the call ended, I didn't move right away. I looked at the alert again. It wasn't an alarm. It was a clock. I walked down the hall to the duty office with my phone still warm in my palm. The duty officer glanced up, saw my face, and stopped mid-sentence with someone else. "You need something. I'm requesting emergency leave. Family situation. I need to travel to South Carolina tonight." He studied me the way people do when they're deciding whether you're steady or falling apart. "You're on the schedule. I'll make it right. I just need the authorization." He nodded once, already reaching for the form. "Give me the basics. My father's estate is being breached." His pen stopped. "Breached how?" "Port facility. Attempted forced access. There's federal jurisdiction." He didn't argue after that. He just said, "Sit down," and started moving. A brief note from us. And then we'll step back the way she said it. Being breached. It sounded less like panic and more like a report. I sat in the chair across from him and watched the paperwork take shape, line by line. Outside the window, Norfolk looked calm, like nothing was happening anywhere. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. When I answered, her voice came through thin and shaky. "Marianne, please don't do this the hard way." I let the silence sit between us for a beat. "Mom, tell me you didn't sign anything." I signed what Victor put in front of me. He said it was just to verify. He said your father never meant to shut me out. Victor is at Pier 14 with a grinder. A soft inhale, a small sound that told me she knew exactly what that meant, and still let it happen. I didn't know he would take it that far. I did. I closed my eyes once, just long enough to steady my breath. "I'm coming home." I told her, "Do not meet him at the port. Do not call him. Stay inside. Lock the door." She tried to speak again, but I was already standing. Emergency leave papers in my hand, my bag half packed in my mind. If you stay with this story, stay quietly. These are the ones that turn on a single decision, and you don't hear it until the end. The drive to the airport blurred into muscle memory. Shoes off, bag open, boarding pass scanned. I didn't look at the news screens. I didn't check messages beyond the one thread I needed. Port security. A new clip loaded on my phone as I sat by the gate. Grainy night footage. A man in a reflective vest standing a little too close to Victor. Victor's shoulders tight. Grinder pressed to metal. The sound didn't carry, but I could imagine it. Heat blooming where it shouldn't. Another message followed. Thermal threshold crossed. Silent alarm active. Evidence preservation engaged. Good. That meant the container was doing exactly what my father designed it to do. Not resist forever. Just wait. I texted back one line. Maintain distance. Preserve logs. No confrontation. A woman sat down beside me and asked if the outlet worked. I nodded and shifted my bag. Ordinary things kept happening. That felt important. It meant I could still think. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered anyway. Marianne Holt, this is Thomas Keene. The name landed with weight. I stood and walked toward the window, away from the crowd. Port security looped me in. He continued, I'm in Charleston. I've seen the footage. Then you know why I'm calling you instead of the police. A pause. Paper rustling. A throat cleared. I know why your father didn't call them either. Back in 2011, I leaned my shoulder against the glass. Planes slid past, slow and patient. He never had the originals. I said, no. He had patterns, shell firms, altered bills of lading, missing signatures, enough to know something was wrong, not enough to survive a courtroom. And now your stepfather is creating fresh violations in a secured port facility. That changes the landscape. Another clip came through, a close-up this time. The grinder throwing sparks. A small sensor light flickering on the container's seam. Red, then steady. Keene spoke again, quieter. The consent affidavit your mother signed gives him a story. It doesn't give him authority. Not over that container. It gives him access. Access is not ownership. I exhaled. The container isn't just money. I know. You haven't opened it. No. Then we're aligned. He let that sit. I'll seek an emergency warrant based on port security violations and attempted damage to federally regulated infrastructure. Separate track from the old fraud. That buys us time. It buys us leverage. My boarding group was called. I stayed where I was. I'm on emergency leave. I told him. I'll be on the ground in Charleston before the enforcement window closes. 36 hours from the first thermal alert, he confirmed. You designed it that way. My father did. Another pause. Then, softer. He trusted you with the burden. I know. I ended the call and watched the video once more. Victor stepped back, wiped his forehead with his sleeve, said something to the man beside him. The man shrugged, a small gesture. Complicity looks like that sometimes. I typed one last message to my mother. I'm landing tonight. Stay inside. Do not sign anything else. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Okay. I boarded when my group was called. As the plane lifted, my phone vibrated with a final update. Thermal activity sustained. No breach. Evidence secure. The box was waiting, and so was I. Charleston always smells the same when you come back at night. Salt, old brick, something sweet rotting under it. I picked up a rental and drove past streets I could navigate half asleep. My body remembered this place even when I tried not to. My mother's house was dark except for one lamp in the living room. I parked a block away and walked the rest. Not for drama, habit. My father taught me that. Don't announce yourself when you're trying to see clearly. The door opened before I knocked. Claire stood there barefoot, cardigan pulled tight like she was cold. Her eyes went straight to my face, then down to my bag. You came fast. I was already packed. That wasn't a lie. It wasn't the whole truth either. She stepped aside. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and something burned. Toast, maybe. Or nerves. I made tea, she said, then frowned like she couldn't remember if that was still true. We sat at opposite ends of the couch. The space between us felt measured. On the coffee table sat a folder I hadn't seen before. White, neat, Victor's handwriting on the tab. I didn't reach for it. He said you'd be angry. She offered. Did he? Yes. He said you always were. About money. About control. My jaw tightened. I let it go. What did he tell you the container was? She folded her hands together, unfolded them. He said your father left assets unfinished, that someone had to step in before things decayed. Decayed. That was his word. I nodded once. And the affidavit. He said it was temporary. Just permission to verify. He said you'd shut me out otherwise. The clock in the kitchen clicked loud enough to count. I focused on that instead of her face. Mom, I said, keeping my voice low. Victor is not verifying anything. He's forcing access to an estate asset in a secured port facility. Her head snapped up. He said it was legal. He says a lot of things. Silence again. She reached for the folder, then stopped halfway. I didn't think you cared, she said quietly. After your father died. You left. You never called about the house. Or the accounts. I called you. You called to check on me. Not the rest. That was on purpose. She looked hurt by that. I let it land. I stayed out because every time I stepped in, Victor framed it as interference, as me trying to take something from you. And you're not. No. I'm trying to keep someone from taking everything. Her shoulders slumped. He's at the port right now. I know. You always know, she said, not accusing. Just tired. I leaned forward then, elbows on my knees. I need you to trust me for the next day. Don't answer his calls. Don't meet him. Don't sign anything else. And if he comes here, then you call me. Or you call the police. You do not let him in. She nodded slowly. You sound like your father. I didn't smile. I just sat there with her, listening to the house breathe, waiting for the next alert. Victor called at 6 the next morning. Not my phone, my mother's. I was in the kitchen, rinsing a mug that neither of us had touched. She glanced at the screen, then at me. It's him. Don't answer. She hesitated, just long enough for the phone to stop ringing on its own. A minute later, the house line rang. Victor liked redundancies. Claire picked it up this time, her back straight, voice careful. Hello. I stayed where I was, close enough to hear every word. Claire. Victor's voice came through the speaker, warm and steady, like he was calling from a grocery store instead of a restricted port facility. I'm at the gate again. There's a delay. They're being difficult. She glanced at me. I shook my head once. What kind of delay? She asked. They're asking questions. Routine. I just need you to confirm the affidavit covers today. It already covers what you asked for. She replied, slow but firm. Yes. But these people. He laughed lightly. They need reassurance. You know how bureaucracy is. I leaned against the counter and spoke up. Not loud. You're not getting anything else signed. The line went quiet for half a beat. Marianne, Victor said, tone shifting, smoothing itself back into place. I was hoping you'd join us down here. This doesn't have to be adversarial. I'm not joining you at a federal port while you damage estate property. Damage is a strong word. You're using industrial equipment on a secured asset. He sighed. Always so rigid. Your father used to admire that. He also knew when to bend. My mother's fingers tightened around the phone. Victor, she said. Come home. Not yet. We're close. Close to what? There it was. The slip. Just a hairline crack. To clarity, he said after a beat. I reached for my phone and pulled up the live feed. Victor stood just outside the container, talking animatedly to a man in a hard hat. The man nodded. Uneasy. Eyes darting toward the gate. A message popped up from port security. Secondary contractor identified. Access granted under protest. Recording ongoing. I typed back. Maintain distance. Preserve everything. Victor's voice sharpened. Claire, they're threatening to shut this down unless I demonstrate continued consent. No, she said, louder now. You are not using my name like that. Another pause. Longer. Then talk to your daughter, he replied. She's the one freezing this process. I stepped closer to the phone. Nothing is frozen. You're choosing to stay. You're enjoying this, he said. Accusation sliding and soft. Watching me work around your silence. I'm watching you document yourself. Silence again. Then the line went dead. Claire sank into the chair at the table. He never sounds like that with me. I know. Outside. A truck passed, music thudding through closed windows. Normal life. Right on schedule. My phone vibrated. Thermal activity sustained. Unauthorized personnel present. Federal notification pending. I looked at my mother. She looked back, scared now, but steady. I didn't think permission could turn into this, she said. It always does, I replied, and stayed quiet, letting the evidence keep building on its own. Thomas Keene's office sat above a bakery that smelled like sugar and burnt coffee. He met me at the door himself, jacket still on, sleeves rumpled like he'd been there all night. You look like someone who didn't sleep, he noted, stepping aside. I slept on a plane, I replied, which felt close enough to honesty. He shut the door behind us and gestured to a chair across from his desk. No flags, no plaques. Just a filing cabinet that had seen better decades and a legal pad covered in tight handwriting. Your stepfather escalated. He began, tapping the pad. Port Authority confirmed continued thermal activity. Still no breach. That wasn't the point, I said. He watched me carefully. Your father understood that too. Keene reached into a drawer and slid a folder across the desk. Manila. Thick. The kind that doesn't pretend to be neat. 2011, he said. Your father came to me with concerns. Missing funds. $6,200,000 routed through intermodal shell companies. Clean on paper, ugly underneath. I opened the folder. Copies of bills of lading. Shipping manifests with signatures that didn't quite line up. Dates that repeated too often. He thought it was Victor, I said. He suspected. That's not the same as knowing. Keene leaned back. The original signed manifests vanished. Without them, there's no chain of custody that survives court. Your stepfather knew that. He didn't take everything. Just enough to make it ambiguous. I flipped another page. So my father waited. He documented. Quietly. 10 years of cross-referencing vendors, tracking handwriting, watching where money surfaced again. And he never told my mother. Keene shook his head. He told her he was restructuring. He didn't want her dragged into something he couldn't finish. I swallowed. My throat felt tight now, not from shock, from recognition. He hid the originals. Yes. In the container. Keene nodded once. Lead-lined interior, high-tensile alloy, thermal sensors tied to a silent alarm and evidence preservation protocol. He called it boring. I almost laughed. Almost. He didn't want theatrics. Keene continued. He wanted time. He knew if Victor ever tried to force access, that act alone would give us jurisdiction we didn't have before. I closed the folder. So this was never about protecting money? No, Keene said. It was about protecting proof. My phone buzzed on the desk between us. Port security. Secondary contractor questioned. Consent affidavit under review. I looked up. My mother didn't understand what she was signing. Keene didn't soften his voice. She signed a limited consent affidavit. It grants verification access, not destruction, not forced entry. Victor crossed that line himself. I nodded. Then it isn't entrapment. No, he agreed. You didn't lure him. You didn't instruct him. You stepped back and let him act on his own intent. I leaned forward. What happens next? I submit for an emergency arrest warrant based on attempted damage to federally regulated infrastructure and port security violations. Financial charges follow once the originals are authenticated. And my role? You're the successor fiduciary, acting within fiduciary duty to preserve estate assets and evidence. I stood. He's going to say I set him up. Keen met my eyes. Predators say that when the door closes. As I reached for the handle, he added quietly, "Your father trusted you to carry this." I paused, hand still on the door. "I know," I said, and stepped back into the street, the weight of 10 silent years finally making sense. By the time I got back to my mother's house, the sun was high enough to make everything look ordinary again. That always bothered me. Crimes don't look like crimes when the light is good. Claire was at the kitchen table with a legal pad, her reading glasses pushed too far down her nose. She looked up when I came in, relief first, then worry. "He's been texting," she said, turning the pad toward me. Messages copied out by hand, dates, times. Victor's words neat and charming on paper, sharper when you saw them together. "Did you answer?" "No." She hesitated. "He came by once." My chest tightened. "What time?" "Early. Before you left for the meeting." She pointed toward the door. "He knocked. He said he just wanted to explain. And you. I didn't open it." Her voice steadied. "I told him to leave." I nodded, slow. "Good." My phone buzzed again. "Thomas Keene. Warrant request is moving," he said when I answered. Port Authority escalated after Victor tried to argue scope of consent with a supervisor. That didn't go well for him. "He thinks permission stretches." I replied. "He thinks silence is agreement." I glanced at my mother. She watched me closely, like she was afraid of missing something important. "What about the accounts?" she asked once I ended the call. "They're being reviewed under suspicious activity protocols, temporarily restricted at the request of federal investigators. So you didn't freeze them?" "No." She let out a breath she'd been holding. "He told me you could do that you had back doors." "I don't," I said. "And even if I did, I wouldn't use them." She nodded. I needed to hear that. We sat there for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. A dog barked somewhere down the street. "I keep thinking I should have stopped him sooner," she said quietly. "You didn't cause this. I signed the paper. You signed what he framed as routine. You didn't tell him to cut metal at a port facility." She looked at her hands. "You let him go there." "Yes." Her eyes lifted. Not accusing, searching. "I didn't push him." I continued. "I didn't suggest it. I didn't remove barriers. I just didn't step in front of him." "That feels close." She said, "It isn't." I replied, "Entrapment requires pressure or direction." I did neither. Victor chose escalation. On camera, with witnesses, she absorbed that. Slow. "Your father always said you learn who someone is by how they behave when you stop correcting them." He believed in letting people reveal themselves. My phone vibrated again. "Port security update. Emergency warrant approved. Units en route. Maintain observation." I stood and slipped the phone into my pocket. "It's moving now." Claire's shoulders slumped, then straightened. "What happens when they come?" "We stay here. We don't interfere." "And Victor, he'll say he was misunderstood." She gave a small, sad smile. "He always does." I went to the window and watched the street. Nothing unusual yet, just time doing its work. Uninterrupted. Victor arrived just after noon. No knock. He used the key my mother had never taken back. I was standing near the hallway when the door opened. Claire was on the couch, hands folded tight in her lap. She didn't look surprised, just tired. Victor smiled when he saw me. That practiced. Easy smile. "Marianne," he said, setting his phone on the table like a peace offering. "Good. We can finally talk face to face." "We've been talking," I replied. "You just haven't been listening." He waved a hand. already settling into my father's old chair. Everyone's been tense. I get it. Estates do that. But this has gone far enough. Claire shifted. Victor, the police are involved now. He laughed, soft and dismissive. They always are when paperwork scares people. I've got nothing to hide. I reached into my bag and placed my tablet on the coffee table. The screen lit up immediately. Live feed from the port. Victor's shoulders tightening as sparks flew from the grinder. His voice, sharp and frustrated, carried clearly. "That's enough," he snapped at the worker. "Just keep it steady." Claire covered her mouth. Victor stood. "That footage was taken without my consent. It's a secured port facility," I answered. "There's no expectation of privacy." He turned toward her. "Claire, you signed the affidavit. You authorized access. I authorized verification," she said, voice shaking but firm. "Not destruction." Victor's face hardened for a second before smoothing again. "You're letting her twist this." I opened the folder I'd brought and slid it across the table. 2011, Harbor Line shipments, altered bills of lading, missing original signatures. He didn't touch it. "You're dredging up ancient history." $6,200,000 isn't ancient, I replied. "And these are the originals." His eyes flicked to the folder. "Just once," Claire's voice broke. "You told me Edmund hid things from me." Victor stepped closer to her. He did. I reached into my bag again and pulled out an envelope, worn at the edges. "This is for you," I told her. She took it with shaking hands, opened it slowly. Her eyes moved across the page. She read aloud, voice barely holding. "Claire, I didn't hide the truth from you. I hid the burden of punishing someone you loved. I left that to time. And to Marianne." Silence settled heavy in the room. Victor backed toward the door. "This is a setup." Before I could respond, the sound of engines cut through the quiet. Tires on gravel. Doors closing outside. A knock followed. Firm, official. "Victor Lang," a voice called. "We have a warrant for your arrest related to attempted damage of federally regulated infrastructure and associated violations." Victor looked at me then. Real fear this time. "You let this happen," he said. "I didn't stop you," I replied. "There's a difference." The door opened behind him. Claire didn't move. She just watched as the truth finally took up all the space he'd been filling. They didn't raise their voices when they took him. No shouting. No hands on guns. Just clipped instructions and the sound of metal finding wrists. Victor kept trying to talk. Not loudly, almost conversational, like he could reason his way back into the room. "This is being blown out of proportion," he told the agent closest to him. "I was acting with consent." "Turn around," the agent replied, already guiding him toward the door. Claire stood up then, slow, like her legs weren't sure they belonged to her yet. She watched as Victor was walked past the family photos in the hallway. He didn't look at them. He didn't look at her. At the door, he glanced back at me. "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to clarify. Outside, the street filled with quiet movement. 2 vehicles, plain, unmarked. Neighbors stayed inside. Curtains didn't twitch. Charleston knew how to mind its business. An agent came back in and nodded toward me. "Ms. Holt, we'll be in touch. Evidence retrieval from the port will proceed once the scene is cleared." Understood. He handed me a card. Thick stock, clean print. When the door closed again, the house felt larger, emptier, like it had exhaled something it had been holding too long. Claire sat back down, hands shaking now that she didn't have to keep them still. "I thought he loved me," she said. I pulled a chair close and sat beside her. "He loved access." She nodded, tears finally spilling, quiet and untheatrical. I stayed there until her breathing slowed. My phone buzzed once more. "Thomas Keene. He's in custody. Port scene is locked down. Originals will be authenticated within the week. Thank you." You did exactly what your duty required. After the call, I stood and walked through the house. Nothing had moved. The furniture stayed where it always had, but the air felt different, lighter. From the window, I could see the street again, empty now. No sirens, no crowd, just a man being removed from a story he never owned. We opened the container a week later. No crowd, no officials standing too close, just my mother and me. Hard hats handed back before we left the port. The lock released with a sound that felt almost polite. Inside, there wasn't drama, just folders, labeled, dated. My father's handwriting steady across every tab. Claire ran her fingers along the edge of one box and stopped. He really planned all of this. Yes, I answered. So we wouldn't have to guess. She nodded. That was enough for the day. The money moved where it was meant to go. Not into my account, not into hers. Into the trust my father outlined line by line. Compliance training, apprenticeships, port safety programs for families who worked the docks the way he had. $8,600,000, accounted for with the same care he used his whole life. Later, back at the house, we sat on the porch as the light faded. No speeches, just the sound of traffic a few blocks away and the slow return of normal things. I thought strength meant staying, my mother said quietly. I thought it meant leaving. I replied. She smiled at that. Tired. Real. In the days that followed, the calls slowed. Lawyers spoke in calm voices. Thomas checked in once, just to confirm timelines. My uniform stayed in the closet. For the first time in a while, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something else to break. Standing at the edge of the port before I left Charleston, I realized something small but solid. Marianne Holt didn't need to be on guard all the time anymore, not because the world got safer, but because she trusted herself to handle it when it wasn't. That was new. And it stayed. We'll step back in now, just briefly. Some stories end with noise. This one ended with space. If you're still here, sit with that for a moment. We'll be close by when you're ready for the next one.